Noah broke the silence. He was in a bind, stuck covering a shift at work, and wondered if I could do him a massive favor. His mom, Laura, was trying to tackle some serious gardening and needed a hand with the heavy stuff. Bags of soil and a massive ceramic planter she couldn't move on her own. It sounded simple enough, a minor interruption to an otherwise empty day. So, I told him not to worry about it. Ethan's place wasn't far, just a short drive over to Armour. It was a route I knew by heart. I was familiar with his mother, of course, but mostly as a background figure. She was usually at home, but often kept to herself, either reading in the living room or just out of sight. My thoughts about her had never gone further than acknowledging she was remarkably attractive for her age. She had to be in her early 40s. Yet, she carried a youthfulness that defied the number. To me, she had always been and only been Ethan's mom. That was the beginning and end of it. So, when I pulled up and walked around to the backyard as Ethan had instructed, I was prepared for a quick, friendly exchange. But the sight of her stopped me for a moment. She was kneeling in the dirt, wearing a simple tank top and shorts, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. A light sheen of sweat glistened on her skin from the afternoon sun. She looked up as I approached, a smudge of dirt on her cheek, and offered a slightly surprised but genuine smile. I felt a strange jolt, an awkwardness I couldn't place, and my eyes darted away for a second toward the half-finished flower bed. "Hey, Noah," she said, her voice warm as she pushed herself to her feet. "Ethan said you might be coming. I really appreciate this." I managed a clumsy reply, my words fumbling for a moment before I gestured toward the stack of mulch bags. "It's no problem at all. Just tell me where you need everything." She laughed, a light, easy sound, and brushed a stray strand of hair from her forehead, leaving another faint streak of soil. "Oh, thank goodness. These things weigh a ton," she said with a casual air. "I swear I have more." When the last bag was empty and the planter was perfectly positioned, we stood back to admire our work. "It looks great," I said, breaking the comfortable silence. She turned to me, her expression soft and appreciative. "I couldn't have done it without you. Seriously." She paused, then gestured toward the house. "Listen, the least I can do is get you something cold to drink. Forget the weeds," she said, nodding at the remaining patches in the flower bed. "Let's go inside." I hesitated for a fraction of a second, but I followed her onto the porch and into the cool kitchen. It felt different now, being invited in by her and not just trailing behind Ethan. She handed me a tall glass of iced tea, and we sat at the small kitchen table. The conversation, which started with gardening, slowly drifted into deeper waters. She talked about her life, about the quiet rhythms it had fallen into, and how even when the house was full of Ethan's friends, she sometimes felt profoundly alone. For a little while, I forgot I was talking to my best friend's mother. It was just the two of us sharing a moment of unguarded honesty. The way she looked at me with an attentiveness that felt both new and significant suggested she was genuinely interested in what I had to say. That was when something shifted inside me. I began to see her differently. There was a whole person there separate from her role as Ethan's mom. She then offered a faint, almost mysterious smile. "Noah, you've grown into such a good man," she said, her voice soft. "It's hard to believe. I remember when you and Ethan were just kids, tearing through this house. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just gave a small nod. A new kind of energy was crackling between us. Something unspoken, but undeniably present. I could feel it, a low hum of tension, and I wasn't sure what it meant, but I knew I wasn't ready to leave just yet. She got up to put our glasses in the sink, and I watched her move across the room. As she passed, I caught the faint, clean scent of her perfume mixed with the earthy smell of the garden. For that brief moment, she wasn't Ethan's mother at all. She was just Laura. The details struck me. How had I never noticed how naturally beautiful she was? It wasn't just about her looks. It was in the way she moved, the quiet confidence she exuded. It was as if she possessed a secret knowledge about the world that the rest of us were still trying to figure out. I hadn't expected to see her, and honestly, I wasn't sure how to act. We hadn't spoken since that strange, charged afternoon in her garden. But something about that day had stayed with me. Something about her smile and the way she had looked at me lingered in the back of my mind. I had tried to dismiss it as a one-off, a strange moment, until she looked up from the seed packet and her eyes met mine. "Noah," she said, her voice a low murmur, her smile slow and welcoming. It was the kind of voice that could instantly put you at ease. I smiled back, trying to keep my own voice casual. "Hey, Laura. Didn't expect to see you here. Just picking up a few things for the garden," she replied, gesturing vaguely with the seeds. "Trying to fill in the spots we cleared out." It was a simple opening, but it blossomed into a full conversation. We talked about plants, about the unpredictable spring weather and other light topics. But beneath the surface of the words, there was that same thrum of something deeper. A subtle but palpable tension was there in the small glances and quiet smiles. Then, out of nowhere, she asked, "Are you doing anything tonight?" She said it casually as if the answer didn't matter, but I could tell she was carefully testing the waters. I wasn't sure how to respond. I shrugged, affecting an air of nonchalance. "Not much, probably just a quiet night at home." She smiled faintly. "Ethan is out with his friends tonight. I was thinking of making dinner. You should come over. It would be nice to have some company." The invitation caught me completely off guard. My immediate instinct was to politely decline. After all, besides Ethan, what did we really have to talk about? But the way she asked, the quiet hopefulness in her eyes made it impossible to say no. Before I could overthink it, I heard myself agreeing. "Yeah, sure. I'd like that." And that was it. I had no idea what I was walking into. But later that evening, as I made myself comfortable, she said over her shoulder, "Dinner's almost ready." I took a seat at the kitchen table, trying to appear more relaxed than I felt. She moved around the kitchen with an effortless grace, as if she belonged there in every sense of the word. Meanwhile, I sat there trying to make sense of the storm of feelings inside me. It wasn't just about her appearance or her easy confidence. It was about the way she made me feel as if I was more than just her son's friend. We ate, and the conversation flowed as easily as it had in the garden. There were no awkward pauses or forced pleasantries. We talked about life, about how things rarely go according to plan. She spoke of her younger days, of the thrill of spontaneity, how she missed the feeling of being excited about the future. She admitted that, with Ethan grown and often out of the house, her life had settled into a predictable, sometimes lonely routine. There was a raw edge to her voice when she said it. It sounded like something she had been holding back for years, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I just listened. I didn't offer any profound advice or deep insights. I just nodded and let her talk. And as I sat there, I noticed things. The way her eyes lit up when she spoke about something she was passionate about. The genuine, unforced sound of her laughter. She was no longer just Ethan's mother. She was a woman with her own thoughts, her own history, her own life. "Thank you for this," I said as we finished eating, and I started to help clear the plates. She smiled at me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something deeper in her gaze. "I'm so glad you came," she said. "It's been a long time since I've had a real conversation with anyone." I didn't know what to say, so I just gave her a small nod, but I knew we were both thinking the same thing. A shift had occurred between us, something we didn't need to name out loud. When I got up to leave, she gave me a hug. It was simple, brief, and warm, but her hand lingered on my back for a fraction of a second too long. In that single moment, Laura was sitting at a high-top table with a few of her friends. She saw me at the same moment, and a slow smile spread across her face as she waved me over. Without thinking, I waved back. Her smile was relaxed, but it held a warmth that hadn't been there before, an unspoken familiarity that made my stomach do a slow flip. "Noah," she said as I approached. "I didn't expect to see you out tonight." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just meeting up with Ethan. I didn't know you'd be here." She let out a soft laugh. "Yeah, just catching up with some old friends. It's been a while since I've had a night out." Her eyes held mine for a second longer than necessary, and just like that, the tension was back. That subtle undercurrent humming between us, always there, just below the surface. I should have walked away. Should have said my hellos and found Ethan. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled up a stool and sat down next to her. We talked, we laughed, and we pretended there was nothing unusual about the situation. Eventually, Ethan arrived and joined our table. The three of us sat there talking about his classes, old memories, and the silly things we used to do as kids. But even with the lively chatter all around us, my attention kept drifting. And every time Laura looked my way, I felt it. That shift, that something in her glance or her laughter that triggered a response in me I didn't fully understand. It felt like we were sharing a secret that neither of us dared to acknowledge. At one point, Ethan got up to get another round of drinks, leaving the two of us alone at the table. I hadn't planned on saying anything, but the words slipped out before I could stop them. "So, Laura, how have you really been?" She paused. Her smile faded slightly, and for a moment, I saw something raw and unguarded in her eyes. "I'm okay," she said quietly. I've been feeling a little lonely lately." Her honesty caught me off guard. It was as if she had peeled back a layer, revealing a person I hadn't known was there. Someone who was so much more than just Ethan's mom. "Yeah," I replied, nodding slowly. "I get that. It's not always easy." She gave a quiet nod in return, and we sat in silence for a few moments. It wasn't an awkward silence, but it was heavy with unspoken questions. Was she just making an observation, or was she quietly asking for something more? As soon as I got home, I collapsed on my couch and replayed the entire night in my head. That dinner, that conversation at the pub, it felt like a confession, that look in her eyes. It was then that I realized this wasn't just some random sequence of events. There was something else happening between us, something unspoken and powerful. And whether I wanted to admit it or not, I was being pulled into it. The scariest part? I wasn't sure I wanted to resist anymore. The next few days felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about the pub, about the way Laura had opened up to me. Her quiet admission of loneliness echoed in my mind. Her gaze had lingered on mine as if she were searching for something. There was a weight in the air between us whenever we were in the same room. A tangible presence I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. I kept telling myself it meant nothing, that it was just a strange coincidence of moments. But I knew better. Ethan and I had always been inseparable. He was my best friend. But lately, even when we were just hanging out, I found my mind wandering back to her, back to Laura. I hated that about myself. I hated the thoughts that refused to leave me alone. The way she smiled, the way she carried herself. She felt different to me now, and it changed everything. That Saturday, I decided I needed to clear my head. I called Ethan and suggested we go to the local park and throw a football around like we used to. Maybe some physical exertion, some return to our old uncomplicated dynamic, could quiet the noise in my mind. When I got to the park, Ethan was already there, warming up his arm. He grinned when he saw me. "About time. You're late," he joked, tossing me the ball. I forced a smile, mumbling something about getting held up. We played hard for the next hour, running routes, talking trash, and trying to one-up each other. But my head wasn't in the game. I was somewhere else entirely. A place that was warm, soft, and deeply confusing. After a while, we took a break, sitting on the grass at the edge of the field. Ethan mentioned something about Laura, saying she seemed off lately. "She says she's fine. I don't want to push, but I can just tell." I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to be honest, to tell him about the conversations, about the shift I had felt in her and consequently in myself, but I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "Maybe she just needs some space," I offered, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," he mumbled. Though I could hear the doubt in his voice, he wasn't buying it. We finished our game and headed back to his place. The whole drive over, my gut was twisted in a tight knot, as if I were walking towards something I couldn't prevent. We walked through the front door, and there she was. Laura was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. She looked up when we came in, her smile bright as if everything were perfectly normal. "Hey, you too," she said cheerfully, but I could see it. There was a weariness in her eyes, a faint tension in the way she held her shoulders. I realized she was playing a part. "Hey, Mom," Ethan said, dropping onto the couch beside her. "You doing all right?" Laura hesitated for just a second before nodding. "Yeah, just a long week." I could tell she was deflecting, treating his concern like it was nothing. I didn't press the issue, mostly because I had no idea how to. My own heart was hammering in my chest, a loud, insistent rhythm I didn't want to acknowledge. So, I escaped to the kitchen, telling myself I needed a glass of water. I needed a moment to breathe, to get away from the emotional weight that hung in the living room. But as I was reaching for a glass, I heard footsteps behind me. Laura was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. "Noah," she said softly, her voice low but direct. "Can we talk for a minute?" I turned, caught off guard. Yeah, sure. What's up?" She stepped into the kitchen, pulling the door almost closed behind her. The space between us shrank, and I felt my chest tighten as she moved closer. I wanted to thank you for the other night," she said, her gaze not quite meeting mine. "For listening. It meant a lot to me." I swallowed hard, her words landing with more force than I anticipated. "Of course," I said, unsure of what was happening here between us, but I held back. I just stood there, caught in the quiet with her, wondering where we were supposed to go from here. Finally, she broke the moment with a quiet, "Thank you again, Noah." "Any time," I replied, but a part of me knew that the word meant something different. Now, a week passed after that tense conversation in the kitchen. It hadn't been dramatic or loud, but it had lingered with me. Every time I saw Laura after that, the air felt charged, different. I couldn't tell if she felt it, too, or if I was just projecting my own internal chaos onto our interactions. Regardless, the dynamic between us had fundamentally changed, and I couldn't shake it. Ethan and I hung out as usual. He laughed and joked, doing his best to keep things light, but it didn't help. Every time Laura walked into the room, my eyes followed her. I noticed the small things, the way she tilted her head when she was listening, the way her gaze would meet mine for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. I felt it. Then came Saturday. Ethan had made plans with his friends, leaving me at their place while I waited for him to get back so we could head out. It wasn't what I had planned, but I didn't mind. The truth was, I needed the quiet. I needed space to try and sort through the mess of thoughts and feelings in my head. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I heard her voice from the hallway. "Noah." I looked up, surprised to see her standing there, her expression unreadable. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, but my heart was already picking up its pace. She walked into the room, hesitated for a moment, and then asked, "Can we talk?" That simple question made my stomach clench. "Yeah, of course," I said, setting my phone aside. She came over and sat on the couch next to me. We weren't touching, but the space between us felt electric and impossibly small. The air in the room grew heavier. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversations lately," she began, her voice soft and careful. "And I think I owe you an apology." I looked at her, completely blindsided. This was not where I thought this was going. "I know I've been a little intense," she explained. "I haven't meant to," I asked, my voice softer now, more cautious. Laura took a deep breath and looked down at her hands, which were twisting the hem of her shirt. "I think you know," she said gently. "There's been something between us, Noah, and I can't keep pretending it isn't there." I froze. Her words hit me squarely in the chest with more force than I could have imagined. I had felt it, of course, but hearing her say it out loud made it real, tangible, and terrifying. "I'm not trying to make things awkward," she continued, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know how to handle this, but I can't keep pretending nothing is happening." I stared at her, my mind racing in a dozen different directions. Every rational part of me was screaming that this was wrong, that I should not be in this position. And yet, there I was. "I don't want it to be weird either," I said, trying to keep my voice steady to keep the entire situation from spiraling. "But I don't know what you want me to say." Her eyes met mine then, direct and unwavering. We sat in silence for a long moment. The quiet was dense, laden with everything we couldn't say aloud. Then she reached out. Her hand brushed against mine. A touch so light it was barely there, but it sent a shock wave through me. My breath hitched in my throat, and for a few seconds, I couldn't move. "This isn't just some crush, Noah," she whispered, her eyes locked on mine. "I don't know what this is, but I can't ignore it anymore, and I don't want to." A tidal wave of emotions washed over me all at once. Guilt, curiosity, desire, and fear. I knew the risks. I knew what could happen if anyone ever found out. But the connection between us felt too strong to deny. And a part of me, a very large part, didn't want it to stop. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "I mean, about whatever this is." She nodded, her fingers curling around mine, her grip firm and certain. "I'm sure." And with that, the invisible line we had been so carefully dancing around vanished completely. We didn't say anything else. There was nothing left to say. We were with each other while keeping that world hidden from everyone else. We built our own private space, our own small reality. But the guilt never fully disappeared. Every time I saw Ethan, a sharp pang would hit the back of my mind. Not because I thought he deserved to know. I couldn't imagine how that would help anyone. But because carrying a secret of this magnitude always leaves a mark. Still, I never once second-guessed the choice we made. We both made it. And no matter how complicated or messy things got, being with her always felt right. Laura and I saw each other whenever we could, which wasn't as often as we might have liked. We never pushed the boundaries. We kept everything discreet, quiet, and out of sight. The hardest part was the performance. Ethan would be over, laughing and talking, completely oblivious, and we would have to act as if we were nothing more than his mother and his friend. We kept our hands to ourselves, our voices neutral. But those small moments, the quick, meaningful glance across a room, the subtle smile that was only for me, the fleeting brush of our hands when no one was looking, they became our language. They were what held us together. When we were alone in her house, we would sometimes talk about what might happen if the truth ever came out. We never had a solid plan, just vague possibilities and half-formed ideas. But we didn't dwell on it for long. We chose to live in the present, in the quiet, in-between spaces where we didn't have to explain ourselves to anyone, where we could just be. It was a calm Saturday evening, almost exactly a year after our secret had begun. I was back at Laura's house, sitting on the living room couch, the same spot where everything had started. The house was quiet. Ethan was out with his friends, so we had the place to ourselves again. Everything felt normal now, comfortable in a way that had once felt so foreign. We had learned how to exist in this state, quiet, careful, and deeply connected. We didn't need to constantly analyze our feelings anymore. The relationship had settled into something steady, something real. It was unorthodox, certainly, but it had become something I couldn't imagine giving up. Laura sat next to me, looking as lovely as she always did. But there was a new softness in her eyes, a quiet contentment. She let out a soft laugh and rested her head on my shoulder. "It doesn't, does it?" she murmured. "But at the same time, it feels like this was always where we were headed, like this was meant to happen." I nodded slowly, my hand finding hers. "Yeah, it's weird," I said. "But it's the good kind of weird. I never expected my life to look like this. But now that I'm here, I wouldn't change a thing." She tilted her head up, meeting my gaze with that same look that always seemed to make the world stand still. "Me neither," she replied softly. "Given everything, I think we've done pretty well. I'm glad we kept it to ourselves." Her voice was firm, certain. "It's ours. Just ours." And she was right. That was the most important part. It wasn't about anyone else. This was something we had built together quietly and carefully. "I'm happy," I said softly, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "We're happy. That's what matters." We didn't say much after that. We didn't need to. We just sat there side by side, wrapped in a silence that didn't need filling. The only sound was the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. A year had passed. A whole year of hiding in plain sight. We had somehow made it work. We kept the secret. We protected what we had. And through it all, we held on to the one thing that mattered most, each other. As the evening wore on and the sky outside deepened to indigo, one thought settled in my mind with absolute clarity. This was how I wanted things to stay. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and strange and difficult, but it was real, and it was ours.